Hey, Mike with Daycare here, and would you like to save money on your taxes? Well, today's video I'll be walking you through a daycare tax deduction checklist, so let's get into it. Now, a couple things before we get started. I am not a tax professional, but we did interview an accounting specialist before making this video, so a lot of that advice came directly from them. But obviously, when you're dealing with taxes for your daycare business, you want to hire a professional to make sure you get everything you need. But a lot of these tips will help you get a general idea on the type of deductions you can use to save money on your taxes for your daycare business. Now, another thing before we jump into the video as well is the fact that before you get into this checklist, one of the key foundations is that you want to keep good records. A major reason why people will get audited or run into trouble with their taxes is that they don't keep good records, they don't document things. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you do that, as that's a key foundation to making sure you get all the deductions you can, and without the proper documentation, you can run into trouble. Now, along with keeping good records, the first thing that you want to track is your income. Now, this isn't necessarily a deduction per se, but at the same time, you want to track your income because that's a big part of maximizing your deductions, is knowing exactly what you made and in what categories. So you want to keep track of things like your registration fees, tuition, late fees, government subsidies you may get, and income from meal plans, and then you're going to work against that income with your deductions to help you save on your taxes. So the next category you want to track is your meal program. And so beyond just the income, there's another side of it that you want to track, and that's the number of meals that are served. And so again, a great way to do this is to keep some type of calendar documenting the meals that you served. So again, breakfast, lunch, dinner, different snacks throughout the day if you offer that as well. Because this can send red flags to potential auditors if your meal plan and the number of meals served does not track correctly with your purchases related to serving meals, so you want to make sure that those match. So documenting that in detail is very important. So again, keep track of all the food that you purchased as well. And if you aren't fully using all of the food that you purchase for the daycare, maybe some of it's personal use, some of it is for the daycare, you want to make sure that that's tracked as well. And that's another category that we'll talk about later. Now, the next category that you want to track are business expenses. And so a lot of these can be deductions for your daycare center as well. So things like payroll, cell phones that you use, office phones that you use, office supplies that you might purchase, software that you use to manage your daycare program, computers that you use, licensing fees, internet, utilities, legal fees, advertising, and much more. So if it's an expense for your business, you definitely want to track that, as they could be potential deductions for your daycare center. The next thing that you want to track is daycare property management and maintenance. And so again, this can fall into several different categories. So it can be things like security for your daycare center, landscaping, general maintenance, cleaning services, basic supplies like light bulbs, as well as safety items like things that you use to baby-proof your daycare center, and even pest control if it's keeping your daycare center safe. So make sure you track these type of expenses because they can end up being tax deductions for your center. The next category are goods and supplies. And so again, this can be things like bedding for your centers, diapers, first aid kits, furniture, kitchen supplies, paper products, laundry supplies, and much more. So think of this category as kind of a general supplies category. And if you use these supplies to run your daycare center, again, they potentially could be a great tax deduction for you. The next category is education tools. And so again, this can be things like computers, maybe it's educational videos, educational games, books, magazines, educational toys, or pretty much anything that you're going to use in the learning process for the children. And so again, keep this as its own category, as it's another great potential deduction for your daycare program. All right, the next deduction category is transportation. And so this category has a couple different tracking versions and ways that you might track this for your potential deduction. So one option is if you have a car or transportation that you use partially for the daycare and then partially for your personal use. And so in this case, some of the things you want to make sure that you track are all the miles that you drive throughout the year, and then what percentage you use for your daycare. A lot of times when you run into this deduction, they'll give you a certain amount per mile that you drive. So tracking this and having a daily log is very important. Another option is if you do have a standalone vehicle that you only use for your daycare center, it can potentially give you the option for even more deductions. So you want to follow a similar process of tracking the miles driven, but also things like the interest that you might pay on the car if it's a loan, the gas you purchase, the oil you use, any maintenance that you use, and much more. So in general, like we talked about earlier, having good records is very important, especially when it comes to this transportation deduction. Now the last category we want to talk about is if you share your home with your daycare, or again, if you just have a building that you're using for your daycare specifically. And so again, you want to track things like the mortgage payment, the square footage that you use for your home versus your daycare, different things like utilities, so light and heat, water that you use. And this is very important because again, if you're using a property that is partly your home and partly your daycare, you're going to need to calculate what percentage of those expenses are actually from your daycare and what expenses are just for your personal use. Because you can't deduct the entire amount because you live in that home for personal use, likely a majority of the time. But if you do have a standalone center, you want to track those expenses as well, because either way, there is a potential of a tax deduction for the ongoing property use that you have for your daycare center. So hopefully you found some value in this tax deduction checklist for daycare centers. If you did, leave us a comment below and like this video as it really helps out the channel. And at the same time, definitely reach out to a tax professional in your area to get the specific deductions for your business. And if you'd like to learn how to build your daycare center faster, increase enrollments, and boost efficiency, we actually put together an ultimate guide to childcare management. So if you'd like to learn how to optimize and automate your childcare management system, download that guide in the link in the description below. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.